Over 40% of four-year college grads fail to land a good first job when they graduate, and most of them are still underemployed 5 years later. College doesn't always pay off the way it should. And Norma Rey-Alicea is the executive director and co-founder of NextGen Talent, an organization that is committed to helping young people, especially young people of color and first generation to college, transition from college into good first jobs. She's joining us today to talk about what young people need to get great first jobs and build successful careers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds.
My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Welcome to Coffee Time, a 30-minute conversation with and for leaders of mission-based organizations. I want to welcome our listeners in the USA, Australia, and around the globe. While you're here, please introduce yourself in the comments and let us know where you are joining us from. I'm Peta Blakely. I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting, and you're watching Coffee Time with Masterminds. Norma Rey-Alicea has dedicated her career to the development of new educational models and career advancement solutions to close the opportunity gap for low-income students with a focus on Latinx, Black, and immigrant students. She's the co-founder and executive director of NextGen Talent. And I want to welcome her and my co-host, Cynthia Rojas, to the show today.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I love it.
We were both on camera angles there.
I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Buenos dias. Good morning.
Yes,
Thank you
good
so much
morning.
for having me. And thank you to everyone who's watching and listening.
Yeah.
Norma, thanks so much for joining us today. Talk a little bit about this problem. I mean, I think there was a time when we all thought everybody should go to college and that is the solution to a whole lot of problems. And you're saying it's not. So talk about that.
Not for everyone. The statistic that you just read is really sobering, I think, for a lot of us, especially those of us who worked in education or have always kind of had this idea in mind, right, that college would be the answer to financial self-sufficiency, to success in a career, to intergenerational wealth building and those kinds of things. And we're seeing that, unfortunately, college isn't paying off the way that we thought. The degree for a lot of young people, like you said, over 40%, a lot of them are still working in jobs 5 years later that don't require the degree that they have. So they might be working in a job that requires an associate's degree and they have a bachelor's, and they also have a lot of student loan debt and are not making enough money to pay their bills and loans. And this is actually why I got into this work. If it's okay, I wanted to share a little bit of my background. So, I started after college. I decided I wanted to stay in my neighborhood, Jamaica Plain. Shout out to JPers who are watching, to work in my neighborhood. And I ended up getting a job at a Latinx community-based organization where I was the director of tutorial services for middle and high school students, Latinx students in the Boston public schools, low-income students. And so many of them were children of immigrants. A lot of them were dealing with a lot of multiple issues at home, trying to work jobs as well as going to school. And I love that work. I worked very closely with the college counselors there and developed wonderful relationships with my students. What I didn't love was that years later, sometimes I would run into them in the neighborhood where I still lived. And I would hear one of two things, which were really, really disturbing and made me angry, to be quite frank, about the situation. One was either that they had finished a 4-year degree, but weren't making enough to pay their rent, including their student loans back. Or that even worse, that they hadn't finished college and now had $15,000, $20,000 in student loan debt. So debt with no credential, essentially, right? And so those two things really made me start to think about what's broken here. And instead of going into government, which is what I originally thought I would study myself, because that's what I had studied in college, was political science, I decided I wanted to stay in education because I felt like I could, really use my experience and the people around me to kind of make a difference in this issue. And so I ended up working at Jobs for the Future for many years, over a decade. Loved that work. I trained counselors in community colleges, transfer schools, CBOs all around the country. So Texas, New York, Oregon, all over the place, Massachusetts, and how to help students figure out what are the criteria you should be thinking about when you're looking at a post-secondary program, whether that's college or something else, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot I had to do to get counselors to think about these other options, right? And I don't even like calling them other options because we shouldn't other any other option, right?
I love that.
Additional options.
Additional options, and I call them career and education, right? Pathways,
Right.
in addition to college. So things like apprenticeships in the building trades. How do you become an electrician, for example, or even civil service job training programs, like how do you become a firefighter in Boston, right? Or even short-term job training programs. So there is an abundance. So what I like to say is, just as we all are diverse in our career interests, we should be showing that and communicating that when it comes to career advising with students. And we're not doing that enough, especially seeing the stats that are out there. Part of it is there's a mismatch between interest and opportunity. Part of it is that, sometimes there are just not enough jobs in a certain area for certain interests, or they're incredibly competitive. Part of it is that, again, not all students want to work at a desk. Not all students want to go, higher up in academic, preparation. Some of them want to work with their hands more. And so the trades would be more, appropriate, or something in healthcare that's more hands-on. So, it's just about acknowledging the diversity of interests and skills and passions that are out there. And you can get a really well-paying, job with good career advancement opportunities through a different kind of pathway without college. And some of the best-paying jobs in this city, are in firefighting or becoming a plumber and things like that. But we don't acknowledge that nearly enough. There's a bias.
No, I mean, we have been, we as a country have been eroding vocational education.
That's right.
Taking career and tech education out of high schools.
That's right. To our detriment.
Yeah, absolutely, to our detriment. We act like it's a, less respectable career pathway. It's for kids who are not so bright, which is not the case at all. It's for kids.
Not at all.
You're right. Who are very technical and hard workers. Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, we all made that mistake, because I had an electrician here the other day.
Yep.
I don't make what he makes in a day.
Neither do I.
No.
Let
me tell you.
We all did something wrong.
We did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there was this basic mathematical mistake, right? Where we looked at people who had 4-year degrees, and we looked at people who had high school degrees, and we said, on average, the people with the 4-year degrees earn more. So let's just take a whole bunch of people from this pool of high school graduates and put them in the 4-year degree bucket, and they'll earn more. But that doesn't mean that there are going to be more jobs out there that require 4-year degrees, right?
That, and as well as the fact, that's a great observation, as well as the fact that, we have to think about student loan debt in this situation, because if you're being crushed with student loan debt, a lot of that income that you may be getting from a higher paying job because you have a degree is being eaten away.
Right.
And so you have to think about, you have to weigh the pros and the cons, and you have to think about, am I getting a credential that I can really pay? Right. Yeah. And that will pay off in the long run over time, so that I can live a good life.
Start earning 4 years later.
Right.
$100,000 in debt.
Right. And you're paying interest on that $100,000. So it's not just $100,000 at the end of the day. Right. And we see interest rates rising. So we have to make these kinds of considerations. And that's what I say with my students. And when I train counselors, is that we really need to think of this as an investment. Your post-secondary education, whether it's college, whether it's the trades, anything that it is one of the biggest financial decisions and investments that you will make in your life. We don't talk about it that way in this country, right? We talk a lot about the importance of financial literacy in this country. There are states in this country now that are starting to implement financial literacy as a high school requirement for graduation. Yet one of the biggest decisions and investments is post-secondary, your college education or post-secondary. And we don't put that in the mix. We talk about mortgages, we talk about credit cards, but we don't talk about being able to sign, yes, I'm going to pay $80,000 in loans when I'm 18 years old. I'm going to commit to that. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah. People who can't drink alcohol or, right.
You know what I'm saying? Exactly. Can't rent a car, are going into this tremendous amount of debt. And it's really, really scary. And the fact that we're not really addressing this in a real way. And I think where we need to start is in the advising space is really, really, critical. It's alarming, to be honest.
How does your organization, NextGen Talent, address that?
Yes, thank you. So NextGen Talent is an organization that is my passion in life. I've come to after this journey of working with counselors and students for so many years. We offer career information and development services. And the way that we do this is we partner with different kinds of partners. So everything from high schools in our area to college access and success organizations. You may be familiar with, for example, One Goal Massachusetts or Bottom Line or College Advising Corp. We work with all of them, thank goodness, and a bunch of wonderful high schools, including Excel in East Boston, Brook in Mattapan, Neighborhood House Charter School in Dorchester, et cetera, touch all of the Boston public schools through our college access and success partnerships because they work in all of those schools. And also places like our Workforce Development Board in Boston. So the Boston PIC is one of our partners. And what we do is we provide them with tools for students and counselors or advisors, coaches, whatever you want to call them, so that they can more easily identify post-secondary programs and career paths that have a strong labor market payoff. And we also provide training to counselors and how to advise students around this process in our approach about making career advising and post-secondary advising more evidence-based, more strategic, and more focused on, advising students into well-paying jobs. Now, I do want to say before I go into like what our specific tools are, that I'm not, I always have to clarify this for folks. In no way are we as an organization saying that pay is the only thing that matters when it comes to choosing a career, or the pay is the only thing that you should be thinking about. The problem is in traditional counseling right to this day, even from, I started this kind of mission in my mind 20 years ago, but to this day, doesn't focus enough on that, especially in light of our student loan debt crisis, right? So yes, keep talking with students, do the career interest assessment, the assessments with students about their passions and their interests, talk with them about their skills, talk with them about all of these things. But we also have to think about what jobs pay and what kinds of debt we're going to go into, right? And make those assessments. That's incredibly important.
Now, this is such an interesting reframing to me because I think, I think I hadn't realized how much we're making those decisions out of kind of moralistic places and these ideas about self-actualization. And, the reality is nobody is self-actualized if they're having a hard time paying rent.
That's right. Thank you. Exactly.
We're also making decisions based on generations of decision making that have nothing to do with us. It's just like summer school. Summer vacation. There was a reason back in the 1800s, 1900s for summer vacation. That reason no longer exists, and yet we still have it. And now we suffer from.
I would argue that we're preparing young people for a career that we didn't even have.
Right.
We go around telling young people like, oh, you are going to pick a career and then you're going to do it for the the next 50 years. That's not my career story. Right. And that's not going to be their career story.
And you're going to decide at the age of 18.
You're going to pick something at 18 and you're going to still like it when you're 60.
And that's the thing. And that's why getting real world experience is also so important in this, any work-based learning experiences, because you cannot understand what a career is about from like an online profile or, like a quick little classroom experiment. Like you really need to have students do informational interviews, and they need to start early. Like, we talk a lot about career exploration in high school. It should really start actually in middle school, but we're not doing that yet because there isn't the buy-in yet. I think, right now we're still just trying to convince folks that we need to start this exploration before senior year of high school. Like that's crazy to wait that long.
Right.
And it's not because students need to choose a career. I always tell my students, don't think of it as a career. Sometimes I don't like using that word because it can sound very overwhelming and permanent, and it doesn't have to be. I always tell them, like, so many people are a career shift. Look, I study political science and I work in education. Like, I never thought I was going to be doing this kind of work. I didn't even know what labor market data was when I was a young person. Who would have said, like, I want to analyze labor market data, help students make more informed post-secondary and career decisions like that? Who knew what that was? So, but it's about going with the flow. Everything changes all the time. Even sometimes your interests change, the economy changes, right? What's available in your area in terms of studying changes. So you have to be flexible and learn. And that's, we've learned that since the pandemic too. We've seen industries collapse. We've seen adaptability be a major, thing, a skill that a lot of employers are looking for. Mm-hmm. And so all of this stuff is incredibly important. And honestly, like for me, all of this connects back to not just opportunity gaps for young people, but also the racial wealth gap. What we're seeing obviously is that, Black women, for example, carry a disproportionate amount of bachelor's degree student loan debt, right? So 41,000 compared to 29 for the typical borrower. We're seeing that, for example, the average Black person 20 years later is still 95% into their student loan. They still owe 95% of their student loan debt versus a white borrower who owes nothing by that point. So there are some major problems happening here, also based on race and obviously socioeconomics that we need to address. And it's a problem because if you are in a tremendous amount of debt and your wages are not growing at the same rate, you're not going to be able to invest in the stock market, in a home. You can't build wealth. You can't build intergenerational wealth. And that's really problematic for communities of color.
Yeah. So we have a listener who's very interested in what you're saying. I'm going to bring up her comment. This is Myra LaSalle. Myra is one of our dedicated viewers. And so she is a former teacher and now an administrator at a high school. She says, I'm glad that you're saying that. I am currently training my counselors on the template we use for our post-secondary plans and what it should look like. Even though we want to make sure that our students have choice, we also want our students to educate themselves.
That's right.
And that sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's about making an informed choice. This is always about choice, right? And we also see that, like you all were talking about sort of like old school ways of thinking about things. Like, again, to bring up race and culture again, like, a lot of times in our families, like I'll say, for example, in Latino culture, Latinx culture, a lot of times our parents, if they, immigrant parents come here and they work, let's say in construction, in labor type work, or, a lot of times they don't realize that construction is actually a great, place to work if you can move up, you can always, get out of some of the more physical hands-on training. It's great at all levels, but, you can become a foreman, you can get into the business side of it, right? That construction is not just about like, killing yourself every day working with your hands and getting paid terribly. Like there actually are great opportunities to work in a variety of things. But there is this bias, like, oh, I didn't come from Mexico for you to be working with your hands, and it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's great work, but there's some of that going on, or, from certain countries, certain cultures, like if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, you're a failure, and so it's like, we need students to also learn that. And I love that idea you're saying about choice, because this is the other thing. And it just drives me crazy lately. So growing up in JP, growing up low income, we're a very marginalized community back in the day. That part of JP looked very different than it does now. I'm in Hyde Square. And what I noticed all the time was like, we were very limited in terms of what we thought of as careers and options for ourselves by what we saw in our immediate neighborhood. We didn't see engineers. So why would we know to even think about dreaming of becoming an engineer, right? We saw policemen, we saw teachers, and a lot of times we fall into professions that affected us, that had a big influence on us. So again, disproportionately, students of color are going into a lot of the helping professions or professions that they see, and they're being limited. And that's why sometimes these career assessments and other things, like, they're helpful, but you really have to, educate them. Say, like, look, there's all these different things you can do. And don't just think of it as, no, construction's bad because, it's all just manual labor and I'm going to be stuck in the same. No, it's like, we have to educate, right? And there's more than just a nurse or a doctor at a hospital. There's a mammographer, there's a surgical technologist, there's an occupational therapist. Like, they don't know these things because, they don't have the networks. That's the other piece. The network piece here is really,
the networks are so important.
The networks, and that's an important part of your program, is the connection, right?
Exactly. Like, we have, of course, as people, low-income folks and folks from underserved communities, we're amazing at networking because we have to, we survive that way, right? Like, finding out, like, who's going to help my mom, like, advocate for me in school because she can't speak English if it's not me doing it, right? Or like, who's going to, like, we survive that way, but it's about having a connection to networks with the power to get you into a good first job. That's different than just having networks.
Talk a little bit about what you mean by a good first job.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Good question.
So, it's a great question.
I mean, we talk so much about good jobs, but just good first job.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
The way we think about it's a great question. Thank you. The way that we think about it is, first of all, obviously, we want you to get into a job that will meet your interests, right? Like, it's not just about the money. That's important. But for us, and this depends on educational level in terms of money, but we're looking at, we use the MIT Living Wage Calculator oftentimes as a resource. I don't know if all of you are familiar with that, but if you're not, you can go just Google it.
If you're not aware of it, you should Google it. It's fascinating.
You should definitely Google it.
What somebody would have to earn to support themselves and their households.
That's right. So it'll show you, but like single person with no children, single with one child, two family households. It's really a great tool. So what we've said mostly, when we speak with folks, is that we would want someone to make at least 80% of the region's median wage, which in Boston would be around like $47,000, $48,000 per year at least. Now, if you have a college degree, that should probably be somewhere more close to 60,000. If you want to have, not have to worry too much about your bills. Again, now this all depends on, all kinds of things, but in general, that's what we say. A good first job should also, I think, offer advancement opportunities. You don't want to get into a job that is kind of a dead end, right? Especially if you don't have a ton of networks. So for us, it's kind of those three things. You want to kind of merge interests with something that will develop your skills, with the having a salary that will allow you to eat, because that tends to be something that, sustains life, and we want to be able to do.
Wow. Not just be able to do, but to actually do with joy. Right?
Yes, exactly. Right. And like, I can only have beans for so long. I got to, be able to try other things that make us a little bit more. Yeah.
So I also want to mention that Myra had made a comment to your previous comment about working with our hands and how our parents have dreams of us becoming doctors and lawyers. That definitely happened with me. And because I'm not a doctor or a lawyer, my mom has no idea what I do. She's like, I majored in sociology. She's like, what's that? And then I got a master's in research. And she says, what's research? And now I'm a consultant. And she asks me all the time, what do I do for a living? Had I been a doctor, she would know what that means, right?
Right. Myra, we just want you to be able to give prescriptions out to people.
Right. So
that's what matters,
But Myra makes the point that our parents came here wanting us to be better and do better. And sometimes that did mean no physical labor. However, this generation is rethinking that. Yeah. And thank God for our millennials and our zillennials. They're doing such a great job at taking back their lives and really setting their own path. Yeah, it's been wonderful to watch those two generations really set their path.
So what has been the reaction from particularly four-year colleges about this? I think there's increased attention. I'm not sure that it's pressure yet on that industry to say like, hey, you guys take a lot of money. Are you really setting people up for success? And there's a philosophical argument about whether four-year colleges were ever designed to set people up for careers, or if they were just supposed to be a hobby for rich people.
Right. No.
We want to know, are you getting hate mail?
Yeah, right. You want me to read some, girl? I got it here. And I'll read it with my hoops swinging at the same time, so y'all can really get the dramatic effect. My Latina hoops. I came ready today. Let me tell you, we don't care how heavy they are. They just gotta be there. So I have to say that I have been pleasantly surprised. So I didn't really have a chance to talk about our tools, and I probably should do that now. So that I can answer that question. So one of our main tools is called Navigator that we have developed. It was a labor of love. We developed it from scratch. And what it is an online searchable directory of career-focused post-secondary programs. So everything from, a certificate degree in surgical technology at Bunker Hill Community College to an associate's in auto tech at Mass Bay Community College to a bachelor's in nursing at UMass Lowell to, a combined BS, MS in social work, for example, at, let's say Simmons, to, how do you become an electrician, right? Like, how do you get into the union in Boston? Year up training, for example, in IT type work, or how do you become a firefighter, right? So we have a very wide range of programs in our directory, Navigator. And what makes us very different, it's nothing like Naviance or any of these other tools that schools are currently using, is that we not only get information on these programs, very detailed information from public websites and college catalogs, but we also interview the programs directly, so that we ask questions like, what's your admissions process? Like, what are some suggestions for applicants? Like, if you could give inside tips on how to get into the program, what would you say? Or keys to success in the program. We ask about things like, what's your program retention rate? What's your program completion rate? What's your the employment rate of your graduates, right? Who's hiring them in the area? And we ask about starting wages. We tie all of that into Boston metro area wages through BPS. We get the data right on wages, let's say for an electrician in Boston. So, we get a much more detailed sense of the program. We also have information on the cost of the program, median loan debt. We get that from College Scorecard. So a really wide range of program level outcomes information, which can help students and counselors really understand, like, what's the value of this program for me, and how can I become a better candidate for admission, and those kinds of things. And so I've been surprised. A lot of colleges have actually been excited to do it. Maybe it's because of how we pitch it to them, because part of it is we want to tell them we want to prepare students to be better candidates when they apply to your program. And we want to, increase awareness about the fact that your program exists. And so I should say that some programs don't make it into Navigator after we interview. If we think that, their outcomes aren't that great, or it's not a great return on investment, we don't include them in the directory. And that can be iffy sometimes, although we haven't had too many
only Boston area programs.
They're mostly Massachusetts. Yep. Mostly focused on greater Boston, because that's where we started our work. But I should say, obviously, there are some programs that are hesitant. They're like, why are you calling me? This isn't required of me to give this information to anyone. I think some of them are afraid to look bad if their outcomes are not great. So there is hesitancy, but I think for the most part, we've been really lucky, and we've gotten to form a lot of great relationships. I think in general in society, there is a pressure now more on colleges to give this information, to be able to explain these things. And let's keep it real, guys. Like, most of us don't go to college. Let's say we're talking about college even, because of the intellectual curiosity. Like 90-something% of students say that they want to get a good job. That's why they're going to higher ed. And so, but we're not structuring anything that way. Like, a lot of times in college, majors are not being taught specifically so that people can get a good job. The curriculum doesn't align with what employers are looking for enough. Right. And a lot of times when it comes to working with young people, we start at, like, what college do you want to go to? And then we think of career. It should be the other way around. Right. What is the path or just the first step job, maybe not a career, but the first step job. And so now let's think about what colleges we should be looking at, what classes you should be taking to prepare for those kinds of career paths. Like, we do it all completely the opposite way. And it's crazy to me. It's crazy. And like you said, we undercount things like apprenticeships. In Europe, apprenticeships are a big deal for a good reason. And here it's a whole problem to talk with people. And counselors don't know enough about apprenticeships, which is why they've been really happy to see that in our directory and Navigator. Now they know how to get in, what it takes to get into the union for electricity or for plumbing or sheet metal or whatever in Boston. That's stuff that they never knew before, because nobody trains them in that, right? We don't think about those things.
Yeah. So back to Peter's question, because I think it's a good one, and we have some audience members waiting for the answer. What is a good first job?
So you mean in terms of the criteria that I just mentioned, or you mean like specific?
Yeah. So when you say, we should have people get a good first job, what does that mean?
Yeah, so it just, again, means, like, you want obviously a job that matches a student's interests, right? But we also have to talk with students about their skill level and what they're doing to get to the point of being able to perform that job. But also, we do have a definition that we're looking for something that pays at least 80% of the region's median wage. So in Boston, that would be, 80% of the region's median wage would be around $47,000 to $48,000. But for a college level, we're looking at around 60 if possible. And again, those are numbers that we've decided as criteria based on things like the MIT Living Wage Calculator, but also jobs that have opportunities to advance, right? Because you don't want to get stuck at a dead-end job. You want to build something over time, a career over time. You don't have to know your career right now, but you want to start at the right step to get on the path that's best for you now, according to what you know now, right? That might change, but you want to make good decisions now so that you can get yourself out of debt if you have it. And start investing in yourself and not just in, like, Mohila.
I think a lot of us, certainly my experience, was that I embarked on one career, and then when it petered out, I thought that I had failed and that right? That was a big surprise, and it was a real negative experience. I think we probably need to start being more realistic with young people, right?
Absolutely. I always tell people you don't want to sell dreams. You don't want to dash dreams, but you don't want to sell them either. That's the worst thing you can do. Sorry, Cynthia, go ahead.
Yeah, Norma, you said something that really resonated with me because my nieces and nephews are now in their 20s. And so what I tend to ask them, and thank you for saying, normally we say, what college do you want to go to? And then we ask about, well, what is it that you want to major in? And it should be the opposite. But I'm constantly encouraging my nieces and nephews to think about what's the life they want to live. Right. Yeah. So I knew very early on that I didn't want a job where I had to wear a uniform. It's just not me. I like fashion. I wanted to get dressed every day. So I knew there was some jobs. Sorry, mommy, I couldn't become a doctor. I wasn't going to wear the doctor uniform. And so I asked them to think about, do you want a job that has eternal overtime, or do you want a job that you leave it and you come back and it's not in your mind all day or all night?
Exactly.
Do you want a job where the inbox gets higher all the time? Like think about the quality of your life and then decide.
I feel attacked, Cynthia. But anyway, fine.
Me too. Me too. I'm ending this show.
I'm worried about in my inbox while we're having this podcast. So just say it. Go ahead. Fine. Girl, listen.
I tell you, but it really, because I was the kid who didn't know what she wanted to do, but I knew what kind of life I wanted to live.
That's
what I knew.
That's an excellent point. And that's one thing that also is so interesting to me about these career inventories and assessments that a lot of schools and organizations use when they're trying to, help students explore careers, is that a lot of them don't ask these very basic questions like, would you want to work inside or outside more? Or do you not care? Like, would you mind working in extreme weather? Do you want to sit at a desk all day? Or do you want to work more independently or more around people all the time? Like, these are basic things that most students are going to say, yeah, that matters to me. Do you want to work at a job that lets you wear really big gold hoops during a podcast? Like those things, right? So, but it's not something we talk about enough. And these are just basic things. I think we really need to reimagine how we do all of this. It's, we're failing our young people because we're setting them up for things that are not real, and for not thinking about the long term. That's also why I think it's important to talk about this stuff as early as possible, even in middle school, because we need to start getting young people to think about the long term. It's hard when you're young to think about the long term, right? But not to scare them and not to make final decisions now, but just to start to think about those kinds of things that you're talking about in the long term. Do you want to sit at a desk all day? Do you like doing that or not?
Yeah, I love that. We are so out of time. We could be talking about
no,
we are. So many more questions. We're definitely going to have you back, Norma, because this is
yes.
I would love that. I didn't get to talk about our labor market tools, which is a whole other thing.
Oh my!
I would love to talk about that. We have a tool that shows where all the well-paying jobs are in Boston, so that counselors can use those and see that very quickly and what they pay and what education they require. So lots to talk about. I'm happy to come back.
And I think we're seeing a couple other cities that, we might need to talk to you about expanding. So.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be cool.
All right, we'll talk. Norma,
yes,
thank you so much.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. And it's so nice to finally meet you, Cynthia. And Peter, I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. And everybody who's on, thank you for listening today. And yes, get in touch with me if you're interested in our work.
Yes. We have some people who want to connect with you. So
I love that. Everybody.
Do that. All right.
Okay. Thank you. You too. Bye.